Hi, this is Remembering the Past, the show where we talk about people who've died recently who've had a profound effect on our history, our society, or our culture. We're going to do 4 very talented people today who were big names in the 50s, 60s, and 70s and are pretty much forgotten today, but hopefully this show will remind you of how talented and how good they once were. We're going to start out with Jackie Cain, who died recently at the age of 86, and she was a jazz singer. She was part of a duo with her husband, Jackie and Roy. He played piano and he accompanied her when she sang. They sang all types of music. They adapted all kinds of songs in a jazzy bebop style, and they were popular on television and in nightclubs, and they were widely admired by the professional singers. Billie Holiday thought that Jackie Cain was one of the best there was. Here they do a show tune from Gypsy on one of Hugh Downs' television shows.
They first worked together with the Charlie Ventura Band, and that was in the late 40s. Over the years, their imaginative musical arrangements and sparkling performance style have earned them a special place in the jazz and entertainment world. Will you welcome, please, Jackie Cain and Roy Kral.
Wherever we go, whatever we do, we're gonna go through it together. We may not go far, but sure as a star. Wherever we are, it's together. Wherever I go, I know he goes.
Wherever I go, I know she goes.
No fits, no fights, no feuds, no egos.
Amigos,
Together.
Yeah, you get the idea. They were pretty good, and you don't hear that kind of stuff anymore. As I said, they did all sorts of music, and of course in the mid-60s you had to cover Beatle tunes. So here they are covering a Beatle tune in a jazzy fashion.
Jackie and Roy, 2 jazz vocalists who reflected the style of the 60s.
say the word and you'll be free. Say the word and be like me. Say the word I'm thinking of. Have you heard the word is love? It's so fine, sunshine, it's the word love.
Jackie Cain, good music that you don't hear much anymore. We're going to move on now to Andrew McLaglen, who died recently at the age of 94. He was a director of television westerns and then movie westerns. His family goes back to the early days of Hollywood, back in the 20s. His father, Victor McLaglen, was in The Silence with Lon Chaney Sr. in the 20s, and then he was a featured performer in a lot of movies in the 30s and 40s. Andrew McLaglen started out directing television westerns, and he directed a bunch of the best television westerns, including my favorite, The Best There Ever Was, and I never need an excuse for playing the theme song to Have Gun Will Travel.
Have gun will travel reads the card of a man, a knight without armor in a savage land. His fast gun for hire heeds the calling wind. A soldier of fortune is the man called Paladin. Paladin, Paladin, where do you roam?
Ah, that never gets old. Well, Andrew McLaglen was English. He was born in London, but his family moved to Hollywood when he was a little boy. And BBC4's Last Word with Matthew Bannister did a good profile on him.
Andrew McLaglen was best known for directing film westerns, even after they'd gone out of fashion. He also made a number of war movies. The London-born director was the son of the actor Victor McLaglen, who took his family to live in Hollywood in the 1920s when Andrew was 5. The Western expert, Sir Christopher Frayling, interviewed Andrew a number of times.
Andrew McLaglen was a sort of gentle giant. He was 6'7". He was rather a quiet, consensual sort of person.
If you're a director, particularly, you have to get a good picture along the way. And if you get a really good one, it'll last you for about 10 years.
His first films as a director were largely for television. He made a huge number, about 300 actually, during his career, of episodes, 50-minuters very often, of TV westerns. They made literally hundreds of Gunsmokes and Rawhides and Have Gun Will Travel and all these TV westerns of the mid-1950s. There's one that's particularly moving, a Rawhide episode of 1959 called Incident of the Shambling Man, which was the last film made by Victor McLaglen, his father. And it's all about a punch-drunk wrestler in the West who's completely lost it and people trying to exploit him. And the punch-drunk wrestler is played by Victor McLaglen, who quite clearly has a kind of dementia in real life.
I broke Tom Hyatt's jaw in the 30th round. Boston, 1846.
And then he makes a couple of small budget films in the 50s, but his big breakthrough is 1963, McLintock.
Somebody ought to belt you in the mouth, but I won't. I won't. The hell I will.
And McLintock's, it's like Rio Grande meets The Quiet Man. There's a lot of punching. There's always a sort of slapstick punch-up in McLaglen's films. The bar window gets smashed, the furniture gets broken, the pianist starts playing Buffalo Girls at double speed, and no one gets hurt.
Shenandoah, famed valley of Virginia.
So then, in 65, he makes Shenandoah with James Stewart, about the American Civil War, and a Virginia farmer, played by James Stewart, who doesn't want to get involved in the war.
Virginia needs all of her sons, Mr. Anderson.
That might be so, Johnson, but these are my sons. They don't belong to the state.
But when his youngest son gets kidnapped by Union forces, he's forced to get involved in someone else's war. And remember, this is 65, we're beginning to move into Vietnam. It's soft, but it's there, and I think Shenandoah is a masterpiece. In addition to his westerns, which I guess are Andrew McLaglen's best-known contribution, he made a whole series of war films, one called The Devil's Brigade, which is a kind of remake of The Dirty Dozen, one called The Sea Wolves, which is a kind of remake of The Guns of Navarone, and The Wild Geese.
Iron Man, wild goose, do you read? Over? Iron Man, wild goose. Sounds like a finger up a tin man's backside, doesn't it?
Amazing cast, Richard Harris and Richard Burton. In fact, one of the tabloids had the headline, "Two drunks in one movie." It's controversial because it was made in South Africa during the apartheid era, although it does have an anti-apartheid message as a film, and it was an integrated crew, but it leaves a slightly sour taste in the mouth. I took along various quotes about his films from books written about the Western, all of which say he's a journeyman, an artisan, he's a craftsman rather than an artist, he's a sort of hit and miss kind of, but not a visionary, not a great filmmaker, a sort of second 11 figure. And he really bristled and said, look, I have many achievements that they don't actually recognise in these books. The first is, I kept the traditional Western alive at a time when it was dying. I launched the late careers of James Stewart and John Wayne. Finally, he said sorry to the Indians. That in nearly all his Westerns, John Wayne, who'd been shooting Native Americans throughout the 1950s in films, suddenly starts admiring the Native American. And I think he's right. What I remember I said to him, which he loved, was he was like a figurative painter when everybody else has gone abstract. And he kept the flame flying of the traditional fundamentalist Western in the way that a figurative painter keeps going. And you can still have wonderful figurative painting. It doesn't mean that it's bad. Whether all his films are wonderful is a matter of a great dispute, but certainly 3 or 4 of them, I think, stand up very well.
We're going to move on now to our feature tonight, Polly Bergen, who died at the age of 84. Here's somebody who really didn't get the credit she was due. She was an incredibly talented performer. Most of the obits talked about her movie roles, and they mentioned that she did win an Emmy in 1958 for a role in the Helen Morgan story. She could do everything, and she was also a fairly talented businesswoman. One thing she couldn't do was pick men. She had 3 pretty disastrous marriages, including her last one, which sort of wiped out her fortune. She had sold her cosmetics business to Fabergé and was very successful, and her last husband sort of invested that money badly. She was a nice Jewish girl born in Knoxville, Tennessee during the Depression. Actually, she wasn't Jewish, she was a Southern Baptist, but she converted to Judaism during her second marriage. Family moved to California during the Depression, and she got a singing contract with Columbia in her early 20s because she had a great voice. They didn't mention this in any of her obits, but she could really sing. Take a listen.
I came, I saw, and I felt, little fool I am, and now I'm in an awful jam. I love him, but oh, I guess I'll have to change my plan. I should have known he'd be somebody else's man.
Well, you know, all this was going on while rock and roll was coming in, so female singers were sort of out. She didn't want to be a singer anyway, so she got into the movies. She was in a couple of Dean Martin, Jerry Lewis junk movies. She was also really great looking, and in 1962 she got the greatest role of her career. She was tremendous in this movie, along with Robert Mitchum and Gregory Peck in the original Cape Fear, and she's on that houseboat when Robert Mitchum is trying to attack her. It's really good stuff.
Cape Fear, starring Gregory Peck, Robert Mitchum, Polly Bergen. Cape Fear, the screen's most terrifying war of nerves.
I got a little plan for your wife and kids.
They're never going for you. Never. Cape Fear, the nightmare that becomes a shocking reality.
Oh, now, come on.
If you touch me, you'll go back to prison for life.
You want to make a little bet on that?
But you will. I'm not like Nancy. I'm not afraid to testify. I swear it. You've got to believe me. I'm not afraid.
Gotta catch that one if you haven't seen it. Looked like she'd really make the big time. The next year she was in Move Over Darling with Doris Day and James Garner. I didn't get to talk about this one when we did the James Garner podcast a couple of weeks ago, so I'm going to put a little bit in there. The interesting thing is she didn't get to sing the the lead song. I mean, as good as she was, you'd figure that, but hey, on this one you got Doris Day.
Hello, I'm Doris Day, and on the other side of this hedge, James Garner, who plays my husband, is making love to Polly Bergen, who plays his wife. Now wait a minute, what am I saying? I'm his wife, and she's his wife. Yeah, that's right.
And if you want to have the laugh of your life, watch them unscramble this torrid triangle in their new movie, Move Over, Darling.
Lips shouldn't touch. Move over, darling. I like it too much. Move over, darling. That gleam in your eyes is no big surprise anymore. 'Cause you fooled me before. I'm all in a spin. Move over, darling. About to give in. Move over, darling.
I think she played the first female screen president in Kisses from My President right after that. And about 20 years later, she was reunited with Robert Mitchum in the TV epic Winds of War. I thought Winds of War was a little overblown. Like I say, she lost most of her fortune in the 80s. She did some Broadway, but she had a late career renaissance as Larry Hagman's girlfriend in Designing Housewives. And here Larry Hagman and she talk about it.
Oh, she's a delight to work with. Yeah. This is my first time with her, so I didn't know what to expect, but she's wonderful.
But, you know, you've got me and Larry Hagman, and we're both, like, not chickens, so it's kind of fun.
Here's the interesting thing about Polly Bergen, though. When you think of Polly Bergen, you used to think of her with game shows, and they barely mention that in her obits. She was a regular, and she was great on To Tell the Truth. In the late 50s, early 60s, the CBS celebrity television game shows were really popular, and you'd see her all the time on To Tell the Truth and occasionally on What's My Line before she went in for her movie career in 1961.
What is your name, please?
My name is Jane Hayward.
Two of these people are impossible. Only one of them is the real Jane Hayward, and is the only one sworn to tell the truth. And here is our host, Bud Collier.
Thank you very much. Good evening, and welcome again to our little game of deliberate misrepresentation, wherein our panel endeavors to figure out which one of three challengers has sworn to tell the truth. To Tell the Truth is brought to you each week by Geritol, America's #1 tonic. And now let's meet our cross-examiners. What is your name, please?
My name is Polly Bergen. My name is Kitty Carlisle.
Here she is as the mystery guest on What's My Line, and they allude to her singing career.
Are you male?
And I resent that!
Do you do something other than act?
Sometimes.
7 down and 3 to go, Miss Kilgallen.
Are you better known for your singing?
Well,
Yes.
to tell the truth, yes.
Yes.
Well, she just gave it away.
Mr. Sir.
I'm not enlightened. Do you ever do a panel show besides singing?
I do that also sometimes, yes.
I would guess Polly Bergen.
Does indeed a colleague in a very true sense, one of yours.
I thought I could sneak that To Tell the Truth.
The record album I thought was going to give it because Polly does make Columbia Records.
Yes.
Yeah. Polly, thanks very much. It's been
Yes,
wonderful
thank
having
you
you
so much.
together.
I loved it.
Good to see you on What's My Line.
Well, I'm going to close on that note. I want to thank my producer, Sid Tepps. I'm going to close with George Hamilton IV, who died recently at the age of 77. Country music singer who had a big hit with this song in 1963, #1 on the country charts. And it's about Abilene, Kansas, not Abilene, Texas.
I sit alone most every night, watch those trains pull out of sight. Don't I wish they were carrying me back to Abilene? Abilene, Abilene, prettiest town I've ever seen. Women there don't treat you mean in Abilene.
Well, George Hamilton IV was a country music singer, but like a lot of country music singers in the 50s, he wanted to be a teenage idol before country music. And in 1956, he had one of the great songs of the 50s. It's the only song where a candy bar is mentioned in the title. It's the first song written by John D. Loudermilk. There's another name that pops up in our podcast a lot. A Rose and a Baby Ruth. Top 10 in 1956 for George Hamilton IV. This one screams 1950s.
We had a quarrel, a teenage quarrel, so I'm sending you this present just to prove that I'm telling the truth. This rose and a baby